Hello and welcome to Raw Chatter. I am your host speaking, Vicky Midwood, integrative health, nutrition, and lifestyle coach. And I am going to delve into a topic that is kind of, I suppose, at the forefront of people's minds this week. Here in the UK, it is Mental Health Awareness Week. And I'm not sure overall how much benefit and how much kind of good or help these awareness weeks do. However, I do believe that the more we talk about mental health issues and the more we can take away the kind of misunderstandings, misinformation, and help people to recognize just what exactly is mental health and what are we trying to make them aware of, then perhaps overall and over time, we can start to help people feel more comfortable talking about some of the issues that perhaps they feel embarrassed or ashamed that they are struggling with. So I want to start off by just a really simple definition of what is mental health. What do we mean when we're talking about mental health? Because I think there's an assumption that when we say those words, everybody knows what we're talking about. And actually, I don't think that's true necessarily. So the term mental health just really means how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Now, what I really want to talk about over and above anything else is that a lot of how we think and how we feel is something that we have perhaps over the years developed as a way of surviving, as a way of coping with life. And that often means that we do actions these days that maybe we don't necessarily really think about. We just do them because they're automatic. And some of those behaviors that we've been doing for a very long time may actually be part of the reason why, as we get older, we feel that maybe our mental health is deteriorating. And this is definitely something that I come across with the people that I work with to help them to overcome body image issues and eating problems, whether it's them being addicted to certain foods, whether they're restricting, whether it's bulimia, whether it's OCD or anxiety, which is massive. Now, when we look at mental health as kind of an issue or an illness or a problem, kind of the two biggies that we always seem to really focus on are depression and anxiety. And I've shared over the recent months and weeks quite a number of posts and videos, and I've had other people on the podcast talking about the fact that some of these terms are used now so glibly that perhaps their meaning has been diminished. Oftentimes, if we are struggling to make a simple decision about something, we talk about how anxious we are. And maybe if we're having a bad day, we talk about being depressed. So we're taking something that actually is quite a serious mental health issue and problem for many, and we're kind of minimizing it, which isn't helpful, because it does mean that those people who are genuinely struggling with either of these things, or often both, because often they do go hand in hand, they kind of feel that they're not being taken seriously, because everybody seems to be depressed, everybody seems to be stressed, and everybody seems to be anxious. And here's what we do know, without a shadow of a doubt: levels of anxiety in society globally have definitely escalated. And is this partly to do with social media? Well, yes, I would say that is one of the reasons why, but also the way that media, so TV programs, news, and kind of newspapers and podcasts, and just live streaming from events around the world, the very fact that we have more access to more things going on globally means that potentially we are seeing things that, if we were to keep ourselves in our own country or even in our own town or our own little bubble, we wouldn't necessarily be aware of these things. But when we've suddenly got war being thrust at us on news channels, and we're suddenly being told about events that are disastrous or dangerous in terms of what's happening with the weather and strike action in various countries and the knock-on effect that could have on us, all of a sudden we're being opened up to things that weren't necessarily issues, problems, or anything that we would overthink, procrastinate, or ruminate on maybe 100 years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot to be anxious about 100 years ago. There definitely was. But what we're anxious about now has definitely changed. And we are definitely, I believe, going into an era where more and more now it's really important that we actually understand how to look after our own mental well-being. We all know since the whole COVID, I'm going to use the word malarkey. It's a northern term, but it was a malarkey. In hindsight is a wonderful thing, but it's kind of not funny. In fact, it's not funny at all that nobody is reporting the stats on COVID for last year, which were very high and in certain countries higher than the middle of the pandemic. Nobody's telling you that. Why? Because that would be then leaving the door open for people to criticize how it was managed, and the fact that all of these people have had vaccines who we are now recognizing are struggling with all kinds of different side effects. I am somebody who was absolutely adamant and steadfast I was not going to have the vaccine, and I know that a lot of people at the time thought that I was mad, stubborn, stupid, number of other things, not really bothered. But I stood fast to my reasoning why I didn't have it then, and I stand fast by it now. And I'm not going to say I told you so, but the stuff that we are now recognizing is linked very strongly to the vaccine. It can't be ignored. And I fully know that correlation is not causation, but over time, and give it another few years, I think we will be able to prove causation in a number of cases. Now, why I'm talking about that is because that was kind of like a point in history, a point in time where suddenly on a global scale, there was almost mass anxiety being created. And even for people who weren't particularly susceptible to it, you can't have helped but have been drawn into that energetic, consistent talking about, thinking about everything. All conversations that people were having was about it, even in different countries. Everybody online was getting together. We were creating communities, which was a positive thing. But a lot of these communities were talking about negative things, and people were walking away from conversations, not quite knowing how they were feeling and what to do with how they were feeling, which takes me full circle back to our mental health and well-being, because it's about how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And one of the things that we absolutely know for sure is that your physical health is huge when it comes to your mental health. And it is something that I have been talking about for not quite, but nearly 20 years now. Because when I came out of rehab in 2005 and decided that I wanted to go back to uni and get my teaching degree and study addiction psychology, and I was very fortunate that I was granted a place on the addiction psychology masters. But I didn't complete it for the simple reason that what I was being told and what I was being fed as fact, I was struggling to take on board, because they were not looking at the physiological side of things. They were not taking into account people's environment, people's sleep patterns, people's choices of food, their knowledge or understanding of nutrition. They weren't taking into account what they were exposing themselves to in terms of what were they watching on TV, what were they reading in newspapers, who were they listening to, who were the kind of influencers in their world. And when I started to talk about this stuff over and above theories, they didn't want to know. They were extraordinarily close-minded, and therefore, I think they were quite relieved when I decided not to continue. And I recognized that if that world of therapy, psychotherapy, psychotherapy and psychiatry and psychology were not open back in 2005 to this stuff, I didn't want to be part of that. And that's why I went into coaching, very simply, because I recognized that my own issues were very much linked to my physiology, to my background. And I'm not just talking about my childhood and trauma. That's a big part of it, no doubt about it. But other things that I didn't know but now do. For example, how my mum was health-wise before I was born. Looking back at how she struggled, and she wasn't making milk, it wasn't coming through properly, but nobody picked up on it. So I was crying a lot, and she thought that she was failing as a mum, and that anxiety gets passed on through. Now, as a baby, you can't talk, you can't say what is going on, but your body, your cells, your nervous system is being primed, is being programmed right from before you're actually born into this world. And this is about physiology. This is about biology. This is about neurophysiology and chemistry. And if we are dismissing the physical, yet we're trying to help people with their mental health issues, it is no wonder that we've got an epidemic. We are starting now, thankfully, to get GPs and referral schemes that are allowing people to get prescriptions of going outside for a walk and meditation and being a part of a gym and exercising for that community feel to get their body moving. We are now aware that there are tons more apps available to us for things like meditation, things like Headspace and Inner Calm, and so many fantastic, and I mean really good meditation apps with people on there who are not influencers, who are not names, but they are just people who genuinely recognize how important it is that we learn to regulate our own nervous system. There is a big upsurge in people being interested in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which is one of the first things that I decided to study while I was in mega study mode, having come out of rehab, and looking at the importance of our language and our programming, and realizing that if we want things to change, then we have to look differently at things. How we think, how we feel, how we act, as I said at the beginning, is often something that's been programmed when we were little, and we're not necessarily aware that the things that we're thinking and feeling are not even true, or they're not even ours to start with. So looking back at, what am I thinking? Because thoughts are not facts. They are just thoughts. And a lot of what we think is just to help us to keep safe and to stop us from feeling uncertain about things. What we absolutely know across the board of all humans is that we prefer to feel certainty over the truth. And this is why many of you may have had conversations with people, and you can't understand why you're saying something that is absolutely true, and they just are not hearing it because they don't want it to be true. Because if that is the real truth, it makes them feel uncertain. So they would rather hang on to the untruth so they can hang on to their certainty. Now, when you know that, and when you also know that we can't progress in life being certain about everything, because that just means that we have a very narrow experience of life. And the very idea of having a narrow experience of life means that we're unlikely to be able to have fantastic mental health, because we're going to be in a fixed mindset. And if our fixed mindset is one that's more geared towards negativity, which it is as humans, we have a negativity bias on purpose, thank goodness, because it means that we're still here on the planet. If we didn't look at the downside of things, if we didn't look at what could possibly go wrong, we wouldn't be prepared for any kind of threat on our lives. So when we go to looking at what could go wrong, it is our survival instinct that's kicking in. But if we stay in that all of the time, and therefore only want to do things where we know what the outcome is, it means we can't grow. It means that we cannot expand in terms of our experiences, in terms of what we give ourselves permission to do. And this is often why people who have mental health issues want the certainty of the known, but also then feel trapped by that, which makes them feel depressed because they can't see ahead of it and they can't see anything different. And so this is why I think it's so important for us all to be aware of how we function as humans and the difference between what our brain does from a survival instinct and how it's been programmed over millennia, but also our mind. Because although it feels often when we are compelled to do certain things, or when we just want to scuttle away and be safe and hibernate inside and for nothing to change, because we want to feel that we're okay and we're going to survive, you've got to understand that it is your brain that's making you do that, but you have a mind. You have a mind that you can use to help you to feel differently about things. And our mind is going to function really, really well if we move our body really, really well. If we get enough fresh air, if we get enough water, if we sleep and we work with our circadian rhythm, so getting up at the same time and going to bed at the same time as often as possible, eating our meals at the same sort of time as often as we can, because our body works best on regulation. Our brain and our mind also like regulation. And that is part of the familiar and the safe. So if we're doing those things, it's like a foundation, so that when an event comes that makes us a bit uncertain and unsure, because we've got solid foundations for our physical well-being, we're more likely to be able to cope with these anomalies or these little curveballs or big curveballs that get thrown at us. And so I just want to wrap up here with helping you to recognize that if you have got issues with your mental health, I know that it can be a big challenge to look after your physical well-being. You don't feel like cooking. You don't feel like going outside. You don't feel like going to the kitchen and making sure you get enough water. But here's the thing, it's a catch-22, if you like. If you don't do those things, you will feel worse. And the less you feel you're able to do, the less you will be able to do. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so this is where, in this mental health week, I'm going to encourage you to reach out for some help, whether it's just to keep you accountable to making sure that you're getting out in the fresh air at some point every day. Get your body moving, whether it is marching up and down on the spot, whether it is singing or dancing in your living room to a song, whether it is doing some squats up and down out of your chair, press-ups on your coffee table. But getting your body physically moving is going to help you to feel and think in a different way. And if we feel and think in a different way, we're going to take different actions. And it's a cycle that works in different ways. If you can imagine thoughts and feelings and actions with arrows going in both directions, it doesn't always have to start with a thought or a feeling. It can start with an action. If we start to move, we'll start to feel better. If we start to feel better, we'll start to think differently. And for many people where depression is an issue and anxiety is an issue, it's because they are in their head so much. And if you can get out of your head and into doing something physical, whether it's rearranging furniture, whether it is tidying out a drawer where you've got to use your hands and your body to move things from one place to another, it doesn't have to be massive. But if you can start to recognize that your mental health and your physical health are like this, you cannot separate them. So if we're not feeling well mentally, it's going to affect us in how we feel physically. A lot of you know this, unexplained aches and pains, particularly lower back issues because you're under a lot of pressure or stress at work, neck and shoulder problems because you're holding tension in those areas. So, and this is because we're maybe not talking about, or we don't know how to handle what is going on and how we're thinking or feeling about what is going on. My point is, you may have mental health issues that are then causing physical problems. You may have physical problems like a back problem or a neck problem or permanent headaches that are actually not physical in their origin, but are mental. And this is why my overriding message is to everybody out there in this mental health week: stop separating the mental and the physical. They are like this. Guys, your head is inside your body. It is attached to all of your organs by a massive nerve that goes up through the brainstem. It's called the vagus nerve, right? And you cannot separate them because they aren't separate. And when we start looking at treating the mentally and the physical separately, that's why we've got so many problems. So I'm going to leave you with this. Look after your physical health and your mental health will improve. If you are struggling to do that, ask for some support, ask for some help, ask for someone to help you to be accountable to starting to look after your physical well-being a little bit better. And I promise you, if you do that, your mental health issues over time will get less. And if you do need to talk to somebody about what is going on, you can utilize my website. You can book in for a chat on there. It's confidential about what is going on for you. Don't suffer on your own. Don't keep this stuff in, because unspoken issues definitely will cause physical symptoms. So let's talk about this stuff. We're all humans. There's a lot of emotions, but pretty much all of us as humans experience similar ones. We might call them slightly different things, but we are all human and we do all experience very similar emotions. You're not unique. You're not the only one who's struggling, but it feels like it when you're in it. So the more you feel able to talk about it, the more you're going to feel you're not broken. You're not somebody who's beyond help, right? There is always help available, but you have to reach out and you have to decide that you've had enough of feeling like this and you just want to change things. Even though you might be scared and even though you have no idea how that's going to be, one tiny baby step at a time. Try and reach out and have a conversation so that you can start to build the skill set to help you to create better health, because mental and physical health is just health. Have a good one, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And don't forget, if you like what you've heard and you want to hear more, do subscribe. Give me a like, give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And if this has not necessarily been for you or beneficial for you, but you know somebody who may just need to hear this, please do pass it on to them. Because the more we can share this stuff, the easier it is going to be to open up conversations across the world. Thanks again. Bye now.